is that nature-based therapy really is a mindfulness practice. Sadhguru and the work that he promotes is just about finding that oneness and about being in the present moment. And as humans, we are nature. 20 minutes in nature-based therapy, and how we must work with the environment, climate change, and the climate emergency. We look at
So thank you so much once again, Keith Glynn, joining RESO platform. RESO strives to step through the noise to cause you most relevant and reliable sociological explanation. First question, it says give us an overview of nature-based therapy.
Nature-based therapy is a therapy that allows us to connect to our authentic self and to find healing through nature-based interventions. So it really sees nature as co-therapist and nature as teacher. And so there's evidence-based research around the benefits of nature-based therapy and the theories that underpin nature-based therapy. And if you would like me to go into them, I can discuss them in more detail around the benefits of connecting to nature. So Roger Ehrlich has stress reduction theory, and there's evidence to show that connecting to nature allows us to improve our physical and psychological well-being. And, this isn't a new concept because Indigenous peoples have connected to nature for a very long time to sustain life. And the reason for this is because nature is part of our biophilia. And Edward O. Wilson has research around this, the biophilia hypothesis, that looks at it is our biophilia. And as humans, we are nature. We're not separate from the natural world. And this is why nature-based therapy and connecting to nature is really, really beneficial for humans. And I think it also shows when we're not connected to nature, the impact that has on our physical, mental, emotional and spiritual well-being is the disconnect. And I think that's becoming more prevalent in today's society when there's such an increase of technology, especially since COVID-19. And then you've got Kaplan and Kaplan's attention restoration theory. So there's a lot of evidence around the psychological benefits again on looking at it alleviates mental fatigue. So even just spending 20 minutes in nature, resting and connecting to the senses allows us to restore that balance in the mind and the body that enables us to keep going on. So that's kind of the underlying, what is nature-based therapy and how does it function?
Important to learn for us also because as human we are nature and we are not separated from nature. This is what I understand. Thanks a lot. So would like to move on to my second question. Says describe how you leverage your background as a social worker in your practice of nature-based therapy.
Love that question. And I think that's what I love about being a social worker. Being a social worker gives us the lens to look at everything that impacts the human experience. And as a social worker, we don't just consider the society that we live in and how that functions, but we also must consider our environment as well, because we are part of that environment. And when we look at the beginning stages of social work, and I remember when I studied social work, we looked at the person in environment concept, which is underpinning of social work practice. So when we look at person in environment, it's not only our living environment or the environment and our relationships or our structural environments, but it's also our natural environment. So I like to extend that. And I think in social work, it's really important that we look at social justice and environmental justice simultaneously. So we must work with the environment. And we look at this, when we look at climate change and the climate emergency, and we look at the importance of what's happening in our world and the changes and the impact that climate change is having on people's mental and physical well-being. And so how do we address social work through looking at our environment at the same time. And it gives a holistic view of social work as well. And how can we bring nature into social work practice is what I'm really passionate about.
Lord, once again, letting us know on that, like how we are a part of nature and then environment, a kind of combination, which I thanks a lot for that. I would like to now move on to my third question. Important question says identify the core principles of nature-based therapy and explain how they differ from traditional therapeutic approaches.
And I guess, as mentioned before, we're looking at attention restoration theory, stress reduction theory, we're looking at our biophilia. So it's really looking at nature-based therapy is a holistic approach to healthcare. And when we look at a holistic approach, we're looking at working with the mind, the body, the spirit, and we're also looking at treating root cause. So when we work with nature-based therapy, we're working with the authentic self. We're working with the person. We're not working necessarily with the presenting symptom or the problem. And when we look at traditional therapies, from my experience, traditional therapies is working with trying to manage the symptom, and it's working directly with the problem. And sometimes it's not always considering the person, or it's not always person centered, or working with the strengths of the person outside of the problem. And that's what I do in nature-based therapy. We're looking at that inner healing intelligence. We're looking at accessing that inner wisdom that a person holds through their relationship, that they can access this, their relationship with nature.
Once again, thank you so much for letting us know as if like traditional therapeutic approaches sort of they focus on the person's symptoms, and whereas like when it comes to nature-based therapy, you're sort of looking inner intelligence and inner mechanism of a person. That's again a wonderful approach to sort of look at how people how help people out of their disconnects, and a lot of problems people face. It may be a mental ailment or a physical or a spiritual or some sort of psychological conditions, but the approach is wonderful. Thanks a lot. Would like to move on to my fourth questions. Important question says discuss the challenges you've encountered in promoting nature-based therapy and strategies you employed to overcome them.
Really good question. I really like that because it is such a problem when people ask, what is nature-based therapy? So often I will present a lot of nature-based therapy at different workshops and conferences. I was just at the International Social Workers Conference here in Melbourne and presenting a workshop on nature-based therapy. And when I have conversations with people, and especially professionals, around, well, what is nature-based therapy? A lot of people don't understand that nature can be a therapy, or they're not exactly understanding how it's working. And one of the ways that I approach this problem is I ask them about their own personal relationship with the natural world. And often I will say, when was the last time you were in nature and how did it make you feel? And I recently had a conversation with someone at a conference and asked them this question, exactly what you asked me: how do you overcome these problems? And she looked for a little bit and she said, I actually can't remember the last time I was in nature. And so I invited her to go out next time she had 20 minutes to spend some time in nature, and then you can understand how it works when you have that firsthand experience. So I think when people don't see that nature is a therapy and it's part of our biophilia and the importance of being connected to nature, then when we reintroduce that concept to them and we invite them to experience it, I think this is a really good way to solve the problem. And this is how I overcome this in my workshops that I run. They're very experiential, and I allow healthcare professionals to have firsthand experience of being connected to nature and using the interventions that I've created so that they get a deeper understanding about how it works. It has to be experiential.
To understand that nature and our relationship with nature is very very important, and to understand the dimensions and areas of nature, how it can how it can sort of cure us and heal us, we miss on to this dimension, to this area, which is quite important for us to understand. Thanks a lot for repeating and reiterating this important area and arena. Would like to move on to my fifth question. It says like a kind of outline a typical session or workshop that you conduct, particularly and specifically with what participants can expect in your workshop and kind of conduct.
Yeah, so a typical session and workshop, I like to use a few different interventions. So, the most important intervention to commence a workshop in is to connect people to nature. And there's a difference between being in nature and being with nature. So, we can be in nature, but sometimes we're on our phones and sometimes we're in our thoughts and in our minds. But how I would typically run a workshop is to introduce people to the concept of nature-based mindfulness, and I would get them to connect to their five senses first. So connecting to what can you hear? It might be bird songs or the rustling of the leaves. What can you smell? It might be the salt air, or it might be the freshly cut grass, and what can you touch? So is your bare feet on the ground, or can you touch the leaves of the trees that might be near you? And what can you see as well? And so we go through the five senses of connecting to nature, and then I invite people to drop into the sixth sense. And the sixth sense is our intuition. That's where we hold inner wisdom and our inner healing intelligence. And so we must drop into the body, out of the mind, to be able to access that inner wisdom. And then I might invite people to go for a little wander, and I might invite them to do some nature journaling. So the nature journaling is a concept of looking at nature as a teacher. So I might get them to sit for 5 minutes just to observe a spot in nature and just to witness what is happening. How is nature working? And then what teaching do I take from that observation, and how might I apply that teaching to a problem or a situation that I might have in my life? So I might be looking at a tree it might be a very windy day, for example, and the wind is really pulling the tree side by side, and it might be losing some leaves. And so what can we learn from that? The importance of feeling grounded and anchored when there's outer chaos around us. So when these things in life happen to us and we're unexpecting them, how do we stay grounded and still? And knowing, right, the impermanence of everything. Everything in life is impermanent. And nature teaches us the impermanence of everything. Nothing is still for long periods of time. Nature is constantly moving and changing, and so is life, so are us, so are our problems. And not to become attached to outcomes or problems, because things will move and change. So we go through this in the workshop. We go through nature mindfulness, we might do some journaling, and we might do some creative art. So each person might collect some items from nature. We come back and we might make like a mandala, and we create some art to tell story. How was our experience in nature? Let's share story through some nature-based art. So that might be a typical workshop that I might do for 2 hours.
A lot important brief up and information. You talked about like being in nature and being with nature, with the nature. That's the difference, and being mindful about the nature and how important it is, because kind of interactive sessions and workshops, I figure out that you've briefed us up, and sort of as people going out and collecting some items and then narrating a story on that. That seems quite interactive. Thanks a lot briefing us up. Now moving again, an important question on to says like this important question says Sadhguru serves as a valuable practitioner and teacher of nature based therapy. His inner engineering tool, which is grounded in philosophical principles, offer individuals a powerful way to cultivate health, vitality, and a sense of inner bliss. By utilizing this approach, people can work towards achieving a joyful and fulfilling life. Please give your comment on the screen.
Um, yeah, so I guess this tool is really, really important because what it does, it helps us to be into the body. So when we do mindfulness practice is about allowing us to still the mind, and it allows us to be in the body, and it allows us to experience our sensations. And through those sensations, that's how we are able to ground ourselves and access that inner healing intelligence and our inner wisdom. And it's almost like accessing that inner knowing. And so I guess that's the importance of having these tools, is that nature-based therapy really is a mindfulness practice. It's about remembering who we are as humans. It's about remembering that we are nature. And it's really important. And I love that about Sadhguru and the work that he promotes, is just about finding that oneness and about being in the present moment. And that's how we access the present moment, is to be mindful and to be in the body. And when we connect to nature through our sensory system and we experience those sensations, we're very much in the present moment. And I think this is really important. This is the key to nature-based therapy. It allows us to be present. We're not in the past. We're not thinking about what we had to do, or we're not in the grief of what we lost or what we didn't do. And we're not in the future. We're not stressed about tomorrow. We're not stressed about that work project that we might have on. We're not stressed about where we might be finding money to be able to feed our family. We're actually able to regulate in our mind and our body and access that spiritual well-being to just being in the present moment and finding that answer, finding that guidance of what do I need now in my life? What can help me? And I think we all have the ability to heal ourselves. We just have to take the time to be present and to listen to our own wisdom.
Also request you to brief us up on your nature-based recent book, which has been published by you. Could you please comment on that?
Sure. So I recently published a book called Nature-Based Social Prescribing, a handbook for healthcare professionals. And this handbook is basically a way and a strategy for any healthcare practitioner to think about bringing nature-based therapy into their practice. So it looks at different ways of how to maybe facilitate a program, how to do some research on the program as well. It looks at evidence-based theories. It looks at ways we can collaborate with other organisations, so looking at conservation organisations as well, and especially around social work. How do we bring nature into social work practice? And how do we make our healthcare system more holistic? So it talks about prescribing nature to our clients. It talks about the important conversations we need to have with other healthcare professionals, for example, GPs and doctors, and encouraging doctors to prescribe nature to their patients or to refer their patients to healthcare professionals who will provide nature-based social prescribing programs. So I feel like this handbook is a really innovative resource to be able to bring nature-based therapy into practice, and make it a necessary practice to bring in the healthcare system.
Thanks a lot once again letting us know on this important area, nature-based therapy. We've talked about what is nature-based therapy and how it differs from traditional therapeutic approaches, and your background as social worker and how sort of you integrate nature-based therapy and challenges you've encountered during this promotion nature-based therapy and sort of implementing in practical life and helping people in your sessions and your workshops participations. And you've also important sort of made an important comment on Sadhguru's inner engineering and nature-based therapy kind of compatibility. You've sort of spoken about such a wonderful possibility for us to have you on RESO platform sharing the screen with us. It is an amazing thing always to have people from different expertise and dexterity to, have their comments and their perceptions, so that we can make a better research database in particular, and academic database as well. But it's a database kind of preparation, not just for researchers and academicians, but at the same time for lay people, in order to enhance the very possible dimensions of a better society, of a smarter society, so that there can be much compatibility with human life and the nature around. Thanks a lot joining us from Australia, ma'am.